what you're thinking you might want to study in college, or maybe a hobby of yours that you really like. I'm just kind of curious what topics you guys are interested in first as we get started. And before I share my screen. International relations. Well, excellent. I have a degree in that. Cool, yeah, international relations is always fun. Arts and social studies, cool. IT, awesome. Very useful. Ooh, yep, math Olympiads, engineering and science, great. Computer science, yep. I know where I was gonna have some computer science and IT. Yep, economics, awesome. Comp sci. Not sure, that's okay. You guys are young, you have lots of time. Yep, ooh, business, mechanical engineering. Perfect. Those must be you two that are sharing a computer, so that counts as two. Akbarbek, I was wondering how first you pronounced that. Okay, Husnuddin and Akbarbek. Okay, thanks guys. Okay, cool, sounds like we have stuff all over, so maybe I'll pull up the old PowerPoint now, because I love my PowerPoint. Let's see, where's my screen share at? Cool, well, thank you for joining me today. My name's Carrie. I currently work at American Councils in Turkmenistan, if you're familiar with Turkmenistan. I'm just trying to find if it's gonna give me my PowerPoint here. There we go. And I'm director of a program called Prep for Success there, which is a college prep program. There's a couple versions for both kids in high school and people who have just finished high school. And we're gonna get this up. All right, does everybody see the presentation?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then I can stop trying to do two things at once and talk normally. So like I said, I currently work in Turkmenistan, although I got evacuated due to COVID, so I've been working from home in Minneapolis for the past year or so, but hoping to get back to Ashgabat at some point. But we run through American Councils, we run a college prep program there that I work on, but I've had quite a lot of other jobs, both in education and in the region. So just some fun background on me. I have worked in education or with youth in Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and briefly in Kyrgyzstan. So I have photos and hats to prove it. I have unfortunately not been to Uzbekistan yet. Hopefully sometime soon I will be there. I first started off as a Peace Corps volunteer in Turkmenistan way back in 2007, which is that photo in the top left, and taught at schools there, and then ran some summer camps about 5 years ago in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. It was very cool. I've also had some boring jobs. I taught SAT and ACT prep for both Princeton Review and Revolution Prep. And I've also worked for Pearson Education, which is a big education company, and that was scoring standardized tests. So I've also had a lot of time just sitting in a room on a computer, reading a lot of student essays or student responses. So I have a good sense of what that's like. And kind of the big one that's relevant to this talk is I worked at the University of Minnesota as an application reviewer. Does anybody know where Minnesota is? That's your geography test.
State?
It's a state, yeah. Do you know where it's like located? East, west, north, south, cold, hot, any ideas?
East, northeast,
Northeast?
I think.
Middle East, maybe.
Midwest.
Midwest? Yeah, it's technically the region is called the Midwest, but it's in the north. I would say it's in the north, so it's on the border with Canada. I like to do quick geography tests. Yeah, so I've worked here for about 3 seasons. So usually what they'll do with college admissions is they hire people to read all of the applications. So yeah, I know there's a lot of different schools in the US you could apply to, all the way from a community college. You've got regular colleges like liberal arts colleges, big universities, and they differ in how selective they are, like how difficult it is to get in. For some of the less selective schools, like a community college, in general, if you can pass the English proficiency requirement, you're going to get in. Other schools are going to be much more difficult. The University of Minnesota is a little bit more selective. It's going to be the most selective of all the public universities in the state. So at the University of Minnesota, we read every single application, and every single application gets read by a human person at least once. So they hire people every year. There's staff that work year round, but then they'll usually hire maybe about 30 people every year that read applications all day, and then kind of make recommendations on them. So you get everything loaded up into a computer screen and you'll read all the application materials. So I did a lot of that, and I did that specifically for international applicants. And so there's a lot of different what we'd call colleges at the University of Minnesota. So if you can see, kind of 2/3 of the way down the list is the College of Liberal Arts. Some schools you apply to, like Pomona, where Elisha went to, or Williams, where I went to, are liberal arts colleges, and everybody is kind of evaluated on the same entrance criteria. For University of Minnesota, it's kind of like I was reviewing applications for all these different schools. So all of the different colleges within the university have slightly different admission standards and things I'm looking for. So for example, you'll see at the bottom, the College of Science and Engineering. If you're applying to that college, I might be looking for more background in science and engineering on your transcript, things like that. If you're applying to the College of Design, specifically, that's where the architecture major is. If you're applying for architecture, I'm going to want to see art classes or physics classes on your transcript, things like that. Do you have any ideas of what probably the most difficult college to get into is at the University of Minnesota? Like the most selective?
Liberal arts.
Liberal arts? Why do you think liberal arts?
Management.
Yep, the School of Management's kind of a big deal, yeah. So I'll let you know, it's actually, and this is going to tie in a bit with Minnesota trivia, it's actually the College of Science and Engineering. The engineering school is very, very competitive. We get a huge amount of applications for that, and especially for people who want to study chemical engineering. And the reason for that is there's a really big company headquartered in Minnesota called 3M. I don't know if anybody has heard of 3M before. They're famously the company that invented Post-its. But there are reasons science and technology is so big. So a lot of people want to go to the school there so they can actually be near that company to try to get an internship there. So that one's really difficult. Same with schools management. All right, let's move on. I did want to highlight one thing while we're here. And I always try, whenever I talk to groups like you, I always at least to try to make one little push to get someone to go to college in Minnesota, because I think it's the greatest state there is. There's a College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences that is unique to Minnesota. One reason I mention it is because when you review college applications, you're sitting in a chair next to someone else who's been reading applications all day or trying to give out scholarship money. And a lot of the people talk about how they wish more international students would apply to CFANS because it's got really good programs and it specifically has a lot of scholarship money available. So for some of you who might be interested in economics, business, engineering, things related to resource management, so environmentalism, soil quality, maybe water management, I would encourage you to check out CFANS. I've got the website at the very bottom, cfans.umn.edu. They have really cool programs, and I think a lot of them would be make you very employable, both in the US and globally, as careers related to the environment become more popular and more in demand. So that's my quick plea to you to check out CFANS if you're thinking about something in science or engineering or business even, to take a look. All right. So we'll get a little more into the parts of the college application here. So in general, these are what you're going to submit with your college application. You've got your transcript, so that's your grades from high school, your test scores. So you're going to at least need a English proficiency exam. And then I think for some schools now, the SAT or ACT are optional. You've got your extracurricular activities. So that's just whatever things you do that are not school. Those are all considered extracurricular. Usually you'll write an essay or a personal statement. I know that's part of the common application. And then you probably have 1 or 2 recommendation letters. Which part do you think is the most important?
SAT scores and transcripts.
Yes, essay, definitely your test scores and your transcript are going to be the most important parts of your application easily. Between transcript and test scores, I would say transcript is more important than test scores, at least at the University of Minnesota. We would rather have a student that had very good grades on their transcript and just okay test scores than someone with amazingly good test scores but not very good grades. Between those two applicants, the student with really good grades and okay test scores is getting in. The student with really good test scores and not a very good transcript might not get in based on the transcript. So the transcript is definitely most important, followed by test scores. But we're probably going to talk a little bit more about the bottom 3 just because those are ones that you do have a lot of control over at this point. So depending on what high school you go to, your transcript could look very different. The one on the left here is kind of similar to what you'd see in the US. It have how the course names, and sometimes we have honors courses, AP courses, different things like that in the US. The top right, for people doing A-levels, I know I heard some of you might be doing the British pattern system and would have grades in A-levels. And then the bottom right, that's what transcripts look like in Turkmenistan. I'm not sure what they're like in Uzbekistan. I'm thinking they might be similar though, with the grades out of 5. So basically that's the Russian education system. Usually for college admissions, what they'll do is they'll have people that will basically train in different curriculums. So like for me, when I was working, I got training in A-levels, IB curriculum, the Chinese national curriculum. We get a lot of applicants from China, so I had to learn the Chinese grading system, Korean system. I was mostly reading applications from Asia and the Middle East. India has its own education system and its own system of grading. So usually what a college would do is assign certain people to either different countries or different curriculums. So they're trying to look at transcripts that look the same. So for those of you in a school that has A-levels, you're probably going to get your application go to someone who's familiar with A-levels with that curriculum. If you've got the grades 1 through 5, that's probably going to go to someone who's maybe assigned to like Russia or to that Russian type grading system. So hopefully it should go to someone who's familiar. So if we get a transcript, whether it's the Russian grading system, it's A-level, it's AP, what do you think the reader is looking for? If I'm looking at your application and your transcript, I'm definitely looking if you got good grades, right? What else might I be looking for?
The major related sciences, major related subjects.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to see first of all, I want to see if they took enough subjects in different areas. So I want to make sure they took both social studies, or they took social studies, chemistry, biology, math, maybe literature, foreign language. I want to make sure they have courses in all different areas. And I also want to try to figure out, well, a big one would be math. Everybody, I want to see the most difficult math class they took. That's going to be a little difficult if you have a transcript that just says math on it instead of, say, geometry or calculus. So if it's not clear in your transcript, you might want to try to get some math on your application elsewhere. Definitely for the School of Engineering, we're all looking for calculus and physics. So every transcript I would get, I'm always looking, did they take calculus? Did they take physics? How many years of chemistry did they take? So we're trying to figure out how well prepared an applicant is and how difficult their coursework is too. Did they take the most difficult courses available to them? If you're in one of the regular public schools, that's probably not an option for you the way it is in, say, the US, where you can choose to take an honors class or an AP class. But that's what someone's looking for. If you feel like your transcript is maybe, what do I want to say? If you feel like the classes that you're able to take in school are maybe not enough, this might be where you'd want to try to take like an additional class online in the summer or something like that, just to kind of boost your knowledge.
Carrie, there's a question in the chat, I think, related to what you were just saying, which is, if you have an option to go for A levels versus focus on getting a high SAT score, which one should you pick and why?
Take A levels.
Do your A levels. Okay.
Do your A levels and take as many as you can at, so there's the A level and then there's like AS. You want to take as many at that A level. I can't remember if it's usually 3 or 4 that you take at the A level, but yeah, I would work on your A level grades definitely. If you want to study engineering, I would say you're going to have to take A level math. If you don't want to study engineering, that might not be as important. But yeah, the A level curriculum, everybody's going to be familiar with that. They'll be impressed that you did A levels, and getting good grades on your A levels is going to be more important probably than your SAT, I would say.
And then for kids who go to regular public schools where they don't have the option of taking advanced classes, would you recommend taking the SAT or anything else?
Yeah, so this is kind of like the big question as we get into test scores. Yeah, your test scores. So to kind of compare them, like test scores and your grades are most important. The difficult thing with your transcript is, like right now, if you've only got 1 year left, that means you've already done 3 years. You can't change them. So the best you can do is focus on getting good grades now. So just get as good a grades in your transcript as you can, but that's something that takes kind of a long time. Whereas the tests, both the English proficiency and the SAT, are things that you spend a shorter amount of time on. So you could spend, 2 months studying this summer, take the SAT in like August or October and get a really good score. You can kind of focus on it a bit more. So the way, in my thinking, the way this ties in with the transcripts is that those of you who are going to school with A levels, that's a very familiar curriculum to people in college admissions. So if you get A's on your A level, they know what that means. If you got a B or a C on your A levels, they know what it means. So A levels are a very good predictor for someone in college admissions. If you are taking A levels, I would say the SAT is less important because you've got a curriculum that is well known. If you go to a school in that Russian system that's having the grades out of 5, it's difficult to know. So like for the University of Minnesota, I worked there for 3 years. In 3 years, we had 2 total applications from all of Uzbekistan. So whoever's reading your application, they're not going to be too familiar with the education system in Uzbekistan or in Central Asia in general, right? So when I worked at U of M, 2 apps from Uzbekistan, 0 applications from, say, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, nothing. So people don't know a lot about that education system, and it's probably less difficult of a curriculum than maybe the national curriculum in some other countries, or people just might not know that. So if you have the regular kind of Russian grading scale on your transcript, I would say the SAT is more important for you, because the SAT is basically a measuring stick that college admissions is going to be more familiar with and more comfortable with. So they might look at your transcript and say, okay, Alisher got all 5s, but I don't know how difficult it was, because I look at his transcript and it just says math on it or history. I don't know how good he is at these things. If you can then take an SAT and get a good SAT score, that's going to be maybe more impactful and help someone make a decision to kind of clear that up. Just because there's not much information on your transcript, and it's more difficult for a reviewer. Does that kind of make sense? Let me know if you have questions. That's how I see it, and especially, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
As I think there are not one round of looking at the applications of students when you are comparing each other, and you are deciding if the student gets in or not. So in how many rounds are there? For example, how many times your application is read? And I mean, for each round, what is most expected from the student, kind of roughly?
This is fun. That's a good question. So it's going to be every school is going to have its own process. And the more competitive schools, like at basically the University of Minnesota or anything that's more difficult to get into, everybody's application is getting read. So I was not high up on the hierarchy. I didn't make any final decisions. But in general, what happens there is that there'll be readers like me who are kind of the low level, and we'll read an application and we basically give it kind of like a recommendation. So usually I'll have my list of requirements. So if I'm, for example, reading applications that people want to go to the College of Liberal Arts, I'll have my paper that said, all right, to admit them immediately, they need this SAT score, this GPA, things like that. But I'll look at all the application documents, and then I actually have almost like, it's online, but it's like a form I fill out, and I'll take notes on their transcript. I'll maybe take notes about their extracurriculars or any interesting information that maybe I learned from an essay or recommendation. And then I will basically assign them a category. So some I'll say 100% this student should get admitted. They have really good grades, really good test scores. They have a volunteering experience that showed leadership, something like that. So for students that are definitely going to get in, I will then put that ranking. They'll definitely get in. And then my supervisor can go see that. She can say, Carrie says they definitely get in. She'll probably look and say, okay, yeah, they're in. So I would say really, really good applicants and really, really bad applicants, it's more quick. So if someone is definitely not getting in, if I look, if they've got a bunch of C's and D's on their transcript. Do you have this word in Uzbek? In Turkmen, we say ikilikchi.
Yes.
Yeah. So if someone's an ikilikchi, they're not going to get in, right? Their grades are terrible. So that's one I'd probably put a recommendation of like, no, I don't think they can do it. That one also, then my supervisor can go and say, yeah, they're not getting in and deny them. it's the ones in the middle that you probably get your application read a lot more. And so U of M started doing this a couple years ago. Actually, they'll do second review. So the ones in the middle where it's kind of a maybe, where it's like, oh, I really want to let them in, but here, these test scores are a little low, or ones that are like me, maybe. Anyone who's kind of on the line of whether they get in or not, that application will get read quite a lot by one reviewer. Then they'll send it to a second reviewer to get their recommendation, and then that's going to get probably looked at pretty closely, the ones on the line. But for U of M, at minimum, 2 people read it. So the initial reader and the supervisor. For someone who's more on the line, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 different people might read that application. I don't know exactly what happens to it when it gets out of my hands. But people will look and people will kind of take notes and maybe discuss a little bit. So you get moved around. Yeah, that's a good question.
There's another question in the chat about translating. Basically, how can students translate those transcripts that perhaps are unfamiliar, written in an unfamiliar language? What's like? How should they approach it? Is an official translation signed by a notary sufficient, or should they do more than that, or is it less formal? Can they just translate their transcripts themselves and attach the translation to the original?
I think they need an official translation. I'm not sure. Yeah, you'd need it. Yeah, you'd want to send the original transcript and then an official translation of it. It depends on the school, how strict they are with the translation, probably. It's probably going to vary. You definitely need the original transcript sent. So they'll have the original transcript in, say, written in Uzbek, and they can at least see the grades on that transcript, so they can know you're not changing the grades. And then you'd want a translation for the class names. So I don't know. That's a question for the schools of what they require, but you generally want that translated. I would also say if you have someone who wants to give you a letter of recommendation that doesn't speak English, I would say have them write it in say Uzbek or Russian or whatever language they're comfortable with, and then get that translated. So I wouldn't want to use language as a barrier to what you can submit. But I don't know the rules for specific schools on official translations. You'd want to contact the school for that. In general, what I've seen in like materials I've gotten at U of M is if a transcript or a letter of recommendation is not written in English, I'll see the original language copy, and then we'll also get the translation. But yeah, you'd want to check with them on process. All right, other questions? Otherwise, I'll talk a quick bit about TOEFL and IELTS. For you, the TOEFL and IELTS are going to be very important since you need proof of language proficiency. I know there are a lot of other tests out there. Duolingo has a test now, all these online ones that are cheaper. They're generally cheaper and a bit easier, perhaps, than TOEFL and IELTS. Some schools are taking them. I don't know. I've talked to my old boss at the University of Minnesota. She has said that the U of M will not be accepting them. They still want the TOEFL or the IELTS, and that the other similar universities in the US are doing that as well. So the TOEFL and the IELTS are still kind of like the gold standard test, if you will. So if you're able to and you have the money to take them, I would definitely recommend either the TOEFL or IELTS. You don't need both. Choose one. And there's 4 different scores. There's like sub-scores, right? There's reading, writing, speaking, listening. Your writing sub-score is very important. So like University of Minnesota has a minimum writing sub-score that you need. We're looking especially at the writing sub-score. So I would say study for that, and especially study for that writing portion, because that's a score that's going to be looked at really closely. You can also, most most schools will let you use your ACT score for English proficiency as well. So you could, if you don't want to spend a lot of money on exams or a lot of time studying for exams, you could just take, I don't know if the ACT is available there. I know the SAT would be. You could just take the SAT, and then if your kind of language scores on the SAT were high enough, SAT also has a writing subscore, so you could just do that one test. And looks like we've got a hand raised. We'll look back.
Oh, good evening.
I see a hand raised.
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can hear you.
So, recently I've heard an opinion that exceeded IELTS score is much less important rather than meeting required SAT score. Is that true?
It probably depends on the school. So usually with the TOEFL and IELTS, each school this is going to be on their college website, is what score is proficiency. So if you go on the University of Minnesota website, it's going to say you need a TOEFL score of 59 or 79 or higher and a writing subscore of 21 or higher. Most schools will do that. So I don't know if there's an argument that as long as your score is above that line, it doesn't matter. I don't know how true that is. It might depend on the college that you're applying to. I know at U of M, the school of management, so like the business and management school, won't take anybody with low English proficiency scores because they have so much curriculum to get through that they don't think students could get caught up if someone with poor English got admitted. Whereas the engineering school, if someone's very, very good at math and physics, but maybe not as good at English, they might get admitted to the engineering school because there's going to be less reading and writing in that curriculum and it's less of a big deal. That's the best I can think of cases where those scores might not be as important. It depends. It depends what the school is looking at. I think of them as being important, and definitely, like at U of M, if you can get a 79 on your TOEFL, you're technically proficient. But if you can get 100 on your TOEFL, that's definitely going to help you out compared to sitting on a 79 TOEFL. It might, and it also might just depend on the school, right? Like, so my experience is at one specific university. But if you're applying to a liberal arts college in a different part of the country that maybe has its own standards, that could be different. I feel like, I want to say Princeton famously has a really weird process, or used to, of how to choose students. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a debate. You could keep debating of which would be more important, TOEFL or SAT, and I don't know if you'd get a firm answer.
I think the recommendation the recommendation for the students is probably that if you're going to prepare for the SAT, and if you're going to get a good SAT score above 1300, then TOEFL and IELTS will not be difficult. So you should probably, like, if your English level is really low, then you should start with the English tests, because SAT will just, you're just going to not be set up for success on the SAT, even the math section, because there's word problems on the math section, so you have to understand English. But if you feel like your practice tests on TOEFL and IELTS put you in a high, like, advanced band, then focus on the SAT and try to get a really high score, and then ask each one of your colleges on your list. Ask each one of the admissions offices, hey, like, I'm strapped on money, I don't want to spend another $180. Would an SAT score of X, which is what you got, be sufficient, or should I still do the English proficiency test? And they'll tell you.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, if you could just someone could just straight up tell you what they're looking for. Yeah, definitely. If you take the SAT first and you can get over 600 on your English portion of it. I forget what it's called now. You wouldn't need to worry too much. I'll just point out that some schools might care more about writing, and it might depend on what you're studying. And I don't know if writing is taught in regular public schools in Uzbekistan. It is not taught in Turkmenistan, and so my program there, we do a lot of focus on writing, because kids who graduate high school in Turkmenistan don't know how to write in their own language because it's not on the curriculum. And there's a lot of countries that don't have writing in their high school curriculum either. So I think that's why it's looked at specifically, because it's maybe one of the most difficult things to learn in English is how to write in English. And depending on where you go to college and what you major in, you have to do a huge amount of writing. So if you're me, you go to an elite liberal arts college and then major in anthropology and psychology. I did a ton of writing. So yeah, you can ask your counselor.
I have a couple more questions. Husnuddin, you had your hand up.
Yep.
Well, hi, it's Mr. Beck. And just I want to ask about extracurricular activities. Like some students write about their projects that they did before. And when the university is reading the applications, the projects done individually, that like the idea of one person, and that person developed it further, is considered as better option, or the teamwork is somehow the more acceptable? I mean, the better.
Okay, good. That's helping me move on because I know we're getting tight for time here. Yeah, so you're kind of talking about extracurricular activities, it sounds, about working on a project. So you're talking about the difference between if there's a project you work on by yourself or a project you work on as part of a group, which might be better than the other. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, so this is another part of your application. And so these other three parts, kind of your extracurricular activities, your essay, and your letters of recommendation kind of flow together. Because what are you writing about in your essay or in your letters of rec? You're hopefully writing about maybe some of these projects or extracurricular activities you do. So when we look at extracurricular activities, these could be sports that you're doing, music, an academic club. This could be work, whether you work somewhere for money or you do volunteer work that's unpaid. Any of these things we can look at. And what we're looking for, I would say the big three would be leadership, commitment, and responsibility. One thing about working on a project with other people is then you can show more leadership if you take a leadership position within that group. And it also can show that you are maybe responsible to other people, that you have to show up to meetings at a certain time, you have to do your portion of that work, and can also show some commitment to a group. So I would say I really like the idea of doing something as part of a group versus just doing it by yourself. It does give you a bit more opportunity to show some of these things like leadership. And also, I mean, it's also good for you personally to kind of work as part of a team, to communicate with other people. You know, you're going to have to do that in college, and you're definitely going to have to do that after college when you get a job. So those are good. I will say, if anybody just has a job, so maybe you work as a cashier at a store, or you're a server at a restaurant, even things like that, make sure that goes on your application. Any paid work, even if you think it's totally unrelated to college, definitely put that on your application. So people know what you do, know what your time commitments are. And even just a job, something like that, can show certain amounts of commitment and responsibility. that you've maybe held the same job for, say, 6 months or something like that. And I will say, if there's any unpaid work, if any of you either live on a farm or you have relatives with a farm and you do work, I would include any farm work, things like that on your application. I mean, well, the University of Minnesota specifically has an agriculture college, so we actually have a special spot when we review applications to even take note if someone has worked on a farm. So things like that, any kind of like non-academic work, still put that on there, because that can still show leadership, commitment, and responsibility, I would say. If you do accomplishments, make sure they're exceptional. Like I wouldn't do too much like participation type of things. Like try to think of accomplishments that are a bit more impressive. And then some people, depending on what you're into, I've seen it occasionally, applicants might list their social media or a website on an application. We just had an applicant for my college prep program. We make them submit resumes, and he put his Instagram on his resume. So I went and looked at his Instagram, which was like, I don't know, it's cute. It's just a typical like 18-year-old Central Asian dude. He had some poems he wrote, which was neat. But he also, do you guys know what a mirror selfie is? It's when you take your shirt off and take like your photo in the mirror to like show everybody your big muscles. Or your scrawny little muscles. He also had like shirtless mirror selfies on his Instagram. So maybe he probably shouldn't have put that on an application. So if you feel compelled to do something like this, make sure it's meaningful. So for example, if you are someone who does graphic design, or you do art, or you do music, maybe there is a reason you would have kind of almost like a portfolio, that if you have, examples of your artwork on Instagram, or if you have a YouTube page where there's like videos of you playing the piano because you're a pianist and you want to be a music major, you could share those. And someone could look at them as kind of proof of your extracurricular work. But if it doesn't make sense for you to be sharing social media or website, be careful. Just be careful you only share something that you're willing to have seen. Were there questions?
Faris has his hand up.
Okay, great.
Hello. I have this question regarding to sending the grades. So how does it work with, say, with gap year students? Like, do we still need a school counselor or some school official to send scores for us, even if we have this certificate, the final certificate in our hands? So could you tell a little about this?
Yeah, you'll need, so if you're a gap year student, you still need all the same application materials anybody else would have. So you still need your official transcript, and I think usually that would have to be sent by the school to make it official usually. The only thing different with a gap year is that you just need to explain what you did during the gap year. So if you graduate from high school in 2020, but you're not going to begin college until 2022, we just want to know what you've been doing, or at least at the U of M, we just want to know what you've been doing. So whether you were working a job, you were doing paid work, or you were studying for the SAT and taking online classes, we just need to know what you were doing. And obviously there's some things that might be more productive than others, but then we just want to know what you've been doing. Otherwise, the rest of your application, you're going to need the same transcripts, letters of rec, essay, same stuff.
What if this period is shorter, like 6 months or so?
I think
still need.
Yeah, I mean, 6 months. If it's 6 months or less, it probably doesn't count as a gap year. And so you wouldn't have to account for time. That's what I did. I did that one year. I reviewed a bunch of gap year applications, and mostly it was just making sure they explained what they were doing.
So as I see it, we we would still need some school officials in other parts of the admission also, so that for example, in filling out CSS and other things, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what, I guess is there a school counselor system where they work on that, or at a specific high school? Usually all you would need from your high school is just them to send your transcript. And then if you had a teacher who was doing like a letter of recommendation, you could work with your teacher on that. Or is there certain paperwork that needs to get done, you're saying?
Oh, okay. Thank you for answering.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know too much. Mostly it's just, you just need the transcript from them, I would think. So as long as you can get that, you should be fine. All right. So you have an essay or personal statement. So one thing I will say about both the essay and your recommendation letters, the majority that I see, or the majority that application readers see, are not useful because they usually don't tell us very good information, or they don't tell us anything new about the applicant. So what I will say for the essay is that your essay is not a tool to assess your writing proficiency. You're going to take the TOEFL or IELTS or SAT. The person looking at your application is going to use that for English proficiency, and they're going to look at your writing subscore to decide if you know how to write in English. That is not what the essay is for. Don't think of the essay as being, I've heard people say this, like, your essay is a sample of your writing. That's not, I don't know, that's not in my experience how they get used. The essay is more of an opportunity to add information to your application that is not already on your application. So something about you that is interesting, something that can demonstrate good characteristics about yourself, such as your ability to overcome obstacles, your ability to work hard, leadership that you've done, things like that. Or also just to explain cool things you did. So maybe you had a chemistry class and you got a 5 on your chemistry class, great. But you also did a project in chemistry that you really want to explain. Maybe you could explain that there. Maybe you work at a restaurant and you just work really long hours and you want to talk about that to show that you are hardworking. I think of the essay as more of content, of pieces of information that you want to get added to your application. So I would say before, if you're doing like the common application, before you even look at the topics for the essay, like the writing prompts, think about what information about yourself is not already included in your application and something that you want to add. So maybe one of your extracurricular activities, maybe you started a club with some of your friends to do a project to clean up garbage in the city. Maybe you can then use your essay as an opportunity to explain what you did there, to add more detail. And think about what information you want to add to your application, and then maybe then go back and look at the essay prompts and just see which one fits best. So you have control of just what information. And then if you've got someone like me who's already read 20 essays that day and is now reading your essay, that just gives me pieces of information that I can grab out. I'm like, oh, like this applicant did this cool project with their friends where they were picking up garbage. Cool. So something to pull out like that. And the only warnings I would have on essay topics, one is sometimes kids write topics about the same thing or that all sound the same. If your essay sounds the same as someone else's, it's probably not very valuable. And also one of the essay prompts on the Common App is usually about like a challenge or setback you overcame. If you choose this topic, make sure it's something an adult will recognize as a challenge. Back in 2019, everybody, both the international kids and the US kids, kept writing about how they lost a basketball game, and it became a running joke. that so many kids were like, yeah, I had this big challenge. We lost our basketball game and it was really difficult for me. And all the 50-year-olds sitting there reading applications were like, what? Like, that's not that big of a setback. Like, you just lost a basketball game. But I don't know. It was the year of the essays about basketball, and there were so many essays about basketball. So sometimes trends appear. But try to think of specifics. Maybe that's what I want to say. Try to think of a way you can be really specific in your essay to add information about yourself. Questions on the essay?
We're going to do an entire session next week on essays, so I think we can move on.
Cool. Those are just my crabby comments of someone who's read maybe thousands of various essays at this point. All right. Recommendation letters. I would say recommendation letters are unfortunately not that useful, because what usually happens is a student needs a recommendation letter and they say, ooh, cool, I'll ask my math teacher, I got a 5 in math. She'll say something nice. And then the math teacher writes a letter that says like, Yildiz did very well. All her work was done on time. She's a great student, which is nice. But if you already gave her a 5 in the class, I already know she was a good student. I don't need a letter that tells me that same information a second time. So again, it's get information that's not already on your application. So if you're getting a teacher to write your letter, try to get them to say something a bit more specific. Talk about a specific assignment you did, maybe a challenge you had in class. Maybe there was a topic you covered that you didn't understand at first and you got a bad grade on your test, but then you worked really hard and got a better grade on your next test, something like that. So I would say you can even give an outline to your reviewer and just say, hey, I want you to talk about these specific things that I did, to give them some guidance to help them be a better writer. And I would also say you don't necessarily have to just do teachers. So if you have a job, it could be your boss at your job. If you do volunteering, maybe someone from an organization you volunteer for, things like that. It does not necessarily have to be a teacher. Usually I would say recommendation letters that come from someone else, from someone outside your school, are a little bit better because they are writing about something that's not already on your transcript. So that's my main point there. Don't just repeat information from your transcript in your rec letter. All right. I know we're kind of tight on time. I don't know how close we are on an hour, or if I can get another 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think you can go 5 to 10 minutes more.
If I can have another 10 at least. I know it's evening. I hope you guys don't have too much to do, but maybe you're all hungry and want to go eat dinner.
That would be great. I mean, for more time.
Okay. Maybe you guys already have some food. I'm hopefully you're watching this with next to a giant bowl of like plov or something to keep you sustained. All right, so we've kind of gone through the application and what we're looking for. So we're just going to take a moment to focus, maybe focus on what parts of your application you want to work on, say over the summer break or over the next year, of things you can do to make your application a little better. So I think a big one, I know we've talked about the SAT and the TOEFL. If you can study for the SAT or TOEFL before you take it, that is going to have a huge impact. For those of you who are thinking about your transcripts and about the courses on your transcript and wishing you maybe had some more diversity of courses or more difficult courses, I would say you could take some online classes. There's a lot of classes available online for free these days, which is amazing. So some ones I would suggest maybe looking into, definitely If you want to do math, engineering, like STEM fields, take more math classes. So calculus or statistics would be really great ones if they're not available at your school, to try to take something like that. Again, with like STEM and engineering, physics and chemistry. Physics and chemistry are ones we're looking for. Computer science. So something you see a lot now are people learning programming languages like C++ or Python, things like that. If you're looking into going into computer science, that might be a nice thing. And you can just, if you're able to take an online class and get a certificate, you can submit that with your application. So usually there'll be an opportunity to just submit supporting documents. And you can submit whatever you want. I've seen all sorts of weird things submitted. I had one kid was in a school play in like 4th grade and submitted the playbill from that. That was maybe a little too far. But if you submit something weird, the worst thing that can happen is it just gets ignored. So you can go ahead and submit extra things. I know graphic design is getting more common. Marketing or communications should have some online courses. And always anything with writing, anything you can do to work on your writing skills would be helpful. Helpful in college, helpful on the TOEFL, helpful at work. So you can always spend time doing that. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of courses. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I know Khan Academy does a lot of cool stuff. There's a University of People, which is a free online university that you can maybe look at. So there's lots of stuff out there. So I know there's not a lot of opportunities for volunteering and not a lot of extracurricular activities that are organized by your school. So what I think would be awesome is if you got together with some other people, so friends or just people you maybe meet, through calls like this, to do some organization of events where you live. So I just made a list of some ideas that could hopefully jumpstart your creativity. So you could do a concert or a theater performance for your community. You could set up a competition either for yourselves or for younger people. So maybe a race like a 5-kilometer running race or a soccer tournament, things like that. Do some programming. An academic competition. So you could make up your own competition of, say, who can engineer something out of all recycled materials, or who can build the best robot. You could have a debate competition, things like that. You could kind of set up maybe an art or a fashion show you could put on. You could organize participants to take part, find a location. So a lot of these would have a lot of organizing skills that you would do that would give you an opportunity to be responsible, to be organized, to show some leadership in your community. You could do a fundraiser. So maybe there's a local organization, such as a nonprofit or someone that just needs money for something. You could hold a fundraiser to get money for whatever that thing might be. If there's people in need, distributing food or maybe other supplies they might need. So picking up litter in your community or doing some environmental work, things like that. So yeah, it's good to network if you can, meet other people like yourself who are looking to go to school in the US and want to do things. You could maybe put together a group, meet people over social media or something and say, hey, what would be a cool event that we could do, that we could organize and work on planning it, to kind of create your own opportunities kind of out of nothing.
I think if I may add on that, one thing that's important is not to, like you said earlier on, it's not just about participation. It's about showing the impact of this and showing the intentionality behind it. So you didn't just go and volunteer because you know that it's a requirement and you're just trying to check a box on your application. Yes. You went and did something that, you talked about in your essay about a story from your childhood that like it feels logically connected to the rest of your application and not just a box that you tick.
Yeah, exactly. And we definitely, in looking at extracurriculars, look for if someone just ticked the box versus got actually involved. So we'll actually look at how long someone did an activity. And that could be for anything. Like if you think of just being on a sports team, if you were on the track team one year and then the soccer team next year and the volleyball team the year after that, versus just playing soccer all those years, it kind of looks better to do the same thing for longer to show commitment to something. So when you think of things like volunteering or activities, it's not important that you did the most things. You're not going for a long list of I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. It's better to show more commitment to one or two things and to be very involved and have a lot of depth of involvement. So you had responsibility, you had dedication, you did a lot of things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks, Alishar. And it's going to be similar if you do a project. One cool thing, actually, one of my participants in my program in Ashgabat now has her own podcast and actually runs a podcast in English, which is very cool. So is everybody familiar with what a podcast is?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they're also listening to podcasts would be a great way to practice for the listening section of the TOEFL IELTS. So I will do a side note. If you can go online and download a bunch of podcasts, National Public Radio would be a great place to start. Anytime you can listen to podcasts in English, you're studying your listening practice. So you could do a project like that. If you do, I think I said before, if you do any sort of like visual art, graphic art, music, you could develop a portfolio that you could then link to on your application. Coach a sports team, lead a music ensemble. Again, you're in a leadership role, being in charge of something. If it's possible, if there's a mentor, if there's a local school or university, if someone that would maybe oversee a research project that you'd want to design, that could be very cool. I know at least in Turkmenistan, a lot of kids do tutoring, especially tutoring in English. But if there's kids around, or even your classmates your age, or even maybe some old person that wants to learn English, you could work with them on that. Some things other people have worked with, homeless animals, orphan children, elderly. Another cool thing is just start a club, get together with some other people, decide what you want to do, focus on environmental issues, debate kind of similar to the podcast. That's like public speaking practice. That's a great one to do. Cultural preservation. I know there's a group of young people in Dushanbe that actually has started this kind of whole movement for preserving some of the traditional culture and architecture of the city and documenting it. So there's potentially a lot of cool things you could do. You just kind of want to go through a process of get together with some people, take a look at where you live. So whether you're in Tashkent, Samarkand, Nakas, whatever, or you're in a village, think of like, what's something the community needs that I can give them, and kind of start from there. And then as you go into your application, so whether you're doing an application where you're just listing activities, if you're including this in your essay, or if you're maybe writing a resume, you're going to kind of want to explain what you did in detail. So if you're, let's say you organized a soccer tournament for like youth in your community, how many hours or how many weeks did you spend planning this event? How many people attended the event? How many children were there? Things like that. What impact did it have on the community? If you're tutoring, I want to know how many children did you tutor? How often do you meet with them? What age are they? Did you have to design your own curriculum? Are you using a book? If you're, in a club, maybe how many volunteers did you recruit that are part of your event or part of your group? What responsibilities did you have? I want, try to think of all these details, and you can even take notes, while you're doing this. If you're, you're planning an event this summer and you maybe need to spend 1 month planning and then, 2 weeks doing it or something, you can always take notes on that. So yeah, this can get listed as an extracurricular activity. This is a great way to get content for your essay. So an essay, describing a program you did in your community, or how you started your own podcast and you interviewed local people to capture local history, something like that. These are all very cool essay topics or things to get into your essay, because it's going to be new information. It's going to be really interesting. It's something people can grab onto, and it's also going to be really different. If you create your own activity, nobody else is going to be writing an essay about that. Also, some of these things in your community, this is a good way to meet new people that might be good for a recommendation letter. So maybe you want to organize a soccer tournament for kids, and you work with a local soccer coach to help organize it, and do a lot of work. And then maybe you can ask the coach to write your recommendation as someone you did volunteer work, things like that. So this is a way where maybe your essay and letter of recommendation are not as big portions of your application as your grades or your test scores, but you're really going to maximize what you get out of them. That if you're someone who's on the line where the admissions office is saying, yeah, I mean, the grades and test scores are pretty good, I don't know, they can then point like, hey, did you read their essay about that really cool activity they did in their community, and their great letter of recommendation? That can kind of tip the scales in your favor to help you get into college, wherever that might be.
Especially some of the more selective colleges where you face a lot of competition, and you have students from all over the world, like China, where they get perfect grades, and then on top of that, perfect SAT scores. So
yes.
What are you competing on, right? Like there's hundreds of students who apply to Harvard with perfect scores, perfect GPAs, SAT scores, and all that, and they still don't get in.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The more selective a school gets, there are people with a 4.0 GPA and maybe, an SAT, 1400, 1500, something like that might not get in. All these things, all these other little details become more important, as you get really selective, where everybody already has good grades and test scores. So I think that helps. Yeah, the Chinese applications are insane. Like, so many of them have 800 math scores on their SAT. It's crazy. But they also spend a lot of time studying for the SAT and a lot of time not doing much else. So they usually don't have very good extracurriculars. One thing that helps all of you is that, so I mentioned before, it's like, because you're from Uzbekistan, people aren't very familiar with your curriculum or with your, education system. But one thing that's good is you seem really unique. They say, whoa, we don't get many, applicants from this country. Where's this at? Like, let's learn more. It already makes you really interesting. So part of what you're doing is also maybe explaining Uzbekistan to the reader a little bit as well, and letting them know that you're someone who would be a big value add to their campus. You're interesting. I hate the word diversity kind of in this context, but you would contribute to diversity. That's kind of going to be your strength. Being an interesting, different person is going to be your strength in this game. Definitely. Yeah, exactly. And then kind of a final thought, you can spend some time researching schools and majors. I would say don't get too caught up on like going to a list of like the US News like college rankings and just like wanting to go to whatever the top 5 schools are on the college rankings or things like that. Do do spend some time researching about different schools. I would say different regions of the US. I'm going to give Alishare a hard time here because everybody I talk to, they either want to go to New York or Southern California. And I'm sick to death of kids telling me they want to go to New York or Southern California. And I say there are other states with much lower cost of living.
There are also other countries.
There's also other countries, yeah, other places. Southern California is very nice too. It's okay.
Before this session, Carrie, I did a poll in the group with the students asking what kind of universities they want to attend.
Yeah.
And so the 3 options I asked were only Ivy League. Two people responded only Ivy League. 6 people said international universities only. I think they misunderstood me because they thought like international as in outside of Uzbekistan. So
yeah,
fine. But that's what was encouraging is that most people, 8 people said, I don't care about location or ranking. I just want to find the best fit for me, which is exactly what you're saying here.
Yeah, think about that. I remember I was at some schools. I ended up in college in Western Massachusetts, which is a state that people in other countries don't know as much about. But there's a lot of good schools in Massachusetts. But also thinking about if you want to be in a big city or a big rural area. I was in a Williams is in a small town of only about 6,000 people. But it was fine for college because you don't really have time to do things in the city. I went to grad school in Denver, but I both basically just hung out on campus the whole time because I didn't have time to go anywhere. go to campus, go to the bar on campus. So yeah, learn about different places and kind of think about what your lifestyle might be in different areas. And yeah, think about what's best fit for you. And also take a moment to maybe learn about who you are. You've spent your whole life just you go to school and your teachers tell you what classes you're going to take. You don't really have any choice. And then you go home and your parents are always telling you what to do. So maybe think about what you want to do yourself. When you get to college, you have a huge choice of what classes you want to take and what do you want to do with your time. So maybe spend a moment trying to figure that out. And then a final little plug I'll do. If you're unfamiliar with Education USA, it's a U.S. State Department funded program that's probably in almost every country in the world that does free advising on college choice. So I got the info for your person in Uzbekistan, Jamila. She's currently working out of the U.S. Embassy. So you can contact her. She's not doing any in-person stuff right now. But Education USA has a lot of great resources for people. And one thing that's nice is if you work with one of their advisors, you become eligible for what's called opportunity funds, which is kind of like a mini scholarship that can pay for things such as like your plane ticket to the US and stuff like that. So if you're unfamiliar, check out EdUSA. Their presence in the country might be growing at some point. I know there might be like American Corners and stuff opening up, but that's a resource that's going to be available to anyone in Uzbekistan. All right, I think that's it for me. I know it's gone long. Thanks for such great questions. And please let me know if you have any more.
Thank you, Carrie. This was super helpful. I think if there are no other, if you have questions, raise your hands. If not, we can wrap up. We have a few more sessions with you guys, with other speakers. And in between, please digest this. The session's recorded, I'll post it, and you'll get to rewatch it if you want. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks guys. Good luck. Have a good summer, okay?
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks.